You know that feeling you get when you look at a famous painting or you listen to a classic piece of music and you just sense there's more going on beneath the surface? A hidden layer of genius that the artist wove right in? Well, today, we're going to apply that exact same idea to one of the most influential texts in all of human history.
We're going to start right at the beginning, the very first sentence of the Bible. In the original Hebrew, it's just 7 words. On the surface, it's simple, it's powerful, it's profound. But for a long time now, some scholars and mathematicians have been saying there's something else hiding there, right in plain sight. Something absolutely extraordinary.
What if the very construction of the sentences, the number of words, the count of the letters, even their numeric values, what if it all forms an incredibly intricate pattern? A pattern so complex it just seems impossible to explain away. That's the mystery we're diving into today.
So let's get right into it. Now, when we say there's a code in the text, it's really important to be clear what we mean. This isn't about secret messages or trying to predict the future. Nope. We're talking about a very specific mathematical design that's woven into the very fabric of the original writings.
It's called the heptadic structure. That comes from the Greek word hepta, which means 7. And here's the claim. The number 7, which is a huge symbol of divine completion and perfection in the Bible, isn't just a theme in the stories. The idea is that it's literally built into the text itself, in the letter counts, the word counts, vocabulary, things that are completely invisible when you're just reading it.
Now, I know what you might be thinking. This sounds like someone is just looking for patterns and, well, finding them. But the story of who first discovered all this is just as fascinating as the patterns themselves, because it wasn't a pastor or a theologian, it was a total skeptic.
Meet Ivan Panin. This guy was a Russian-born, Harvard-educated genius, a real literary critic. In his early days, he was a nihilist, someone who believes in nothing, and was even part of plots against the Tsar. He was a firm agnostic. But then, in 1890, his whole world got turned upside down. While he was studying the New Testament in its original Greek, he stumbled on these numerical patterns, and they were so profound, so statistically impossible, that they completely shattered his agnostic worldview and actually led him to convert to Christianity. He then spent the rest of his life, we're talking 50 years, compiling over 40,000 pages of handwritten notes to document this incredible structure.
So what did Panin find that was so compelling it could change a man's entire life like that? Well, let's take a look at some of the evidence that he and others, like the theologian Chuck Missler, have been pointing to for years.
And we have to go back to where it all starts, Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. Pantarin's whole journey began with these first 7 Hebrew words. He wasn't looking at their meaning, but at their raw mathematical properties.
Okay, this is where it starts to get pretty wild. It's not just one thing, it's how it all layers together. So first off, the verse has exactly 7 Hebrew words. Okay, maybe coincidence, right? But then you find out those 7 words are made up of exactly 28 letters. That's a perfect 7 times 4. And then if you take the 3 main nouns, God, heaven, and earth, their numeric value in Hebrew adds up to 777. And it keeps going. Proponents of this say there are over 30 different independent patterns of 7 in this one verse alone.
But look, a single verse, no matter how amazing, could still be an anomaly, a fluke. So let's jump ahead to the New Testament, to the genealogy of Jesus in the book of Matthew. That's a passage that, let's be honest, most of us probably just skim through. But mathematically, it's considered one of the most stunning examples of this entire phenomenon.
Just take a second to look at this data. The consistency here is just staggering. In the original Greek, the number of unique words that Matthew uses is 49, which is exactly 7 times 7. The number of nouns, 56, that's 7 times 8. The number of words that start with a vowel, also 56. The number of male names in that long list, 35, or 7 times 5. And the number of generations listed, 42, which is 7 times 6. Do you see what's happening? These are all totally separate, independent features of the language, yet somehow they are all perfect multiples of 7.
So the big question is, what are the odds of this just happening by chance? Well, researchers did the math. The probability of just 8 of these patterns showing up randomly in a passage like this is less than 1 in 5.7 million. And remember, Panin found way more than just 8 features. The probability just becomes ridiculously, astronomically small.
Okay, so if it's not random chance, and it's something the human authors couldn't have possibly engineered, can you imagine Matthew writing this genealogy while trying to keep track of dozens of different letter and word counts? So if it's not them, then what does all this mean?
Well, proponents like Chuck Missler don't mince words. For them, this isn't just some neat little trivia or a cool coincidence. They see it as a deliberate mathematical signature, a form of proof that a single, supernatural author designed the whole thing.
The best analogy is to think of it like the watermark on a $100 bill. It's woven into the very paper to make it impossible to counterfeit. The argument here is that this mathematical structure, which runs through all 66 books, written by more than 30 different authors over 1,500 years, acts as a kind of divine fingerprint. For this to work, every single author would have had to coordinate perfectly with everyone who wrote before them and everyone who would write after them. It's impossible. The only explanation, they claim, is a single architect existing outside of time.
But what about the parts that seem to have errors? For example, in the book of 1 Kings, there's a description of a large circular basin. It says it has a 10-cubit diameter and a 30-cubit circumference, but mathematically, that's just wrong. Anyone who remembers high school geometry knows that pi dictates the circumference should be over 31. For centuries, this was held up as a clear-cut error in the Bible.
And this is where the theory gets even crazier. Researchers point out that in the original Hebrew text, the word for circumference in this one specific verse is spelled in a very unusual way. Now, if you take the numeric value of that weird spelling and divide it by the value of the normal spelling, you get what they call a correction factor. Now watch this. When you take the Bible's stated value of 30 and multiply it by that correction factor, you get 31.415. That is the value of pi accurate to 4 decimal places. The claim is that the text actually contains its own hidden correction code, embedding a level of mathematical precision that was just unheard of at the time it was written.
So let's pull all of this together. We've got these incredible patterns of the number 7 everywhere. We even have what look like mistakes that actually seem to contain their own mind-bending correction codes. What's the big picture here?
The overarching idea is that this isn't just a collection of books written by different people. It's a single integrated message system. It's the product of what proponents call supernatural engineering. The idea is that these numeric patterns prove that one single mind authored the entire library from Genesis all the way to Revelation, making sure every last detail was part of one big, coherent design.
And really, that brings us to the final and most challenging question that all of this evidence raises. It forces you to think about where this text came from in a totally new way. If these mathematical patterns are real, if they're too complex to be random chance, and too intricate for any human authors to have designed, then what does that imply about the book's origin? What does it say about its author? That is the question at the very heart of this divine signature.